Okay, um, 1 more minute, then we will start the assignment. And we invite all the speaker can join to the stage. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Today's event is jointly organized by following organizations: Taiwan Open Parliament Multi-Stakeholder Forum, and Dictatorial Legislativo from Argentina, and also 2 CSO from Taiwan, First Open Cultural Foundations, and Citizen Congress Watch, which is my organizations. I'm today's moderator. My name is James Kang. I'm the Vice President of Citizen Congress Watch. So Taiwan is one of the world's most vibrant democracy, and the 10th Parliament Legislative Yuan generated for the first Open Parliament Action Plan in 2020, which represent an important aspect of this democracy. In the action plan, 5 major objectives has been set: transparency, openness, participation, digitalization, and literacy. While Taiwan is not yet an official member of the OGP, the principles of the OGP align with the core values of Taiwan's democracy. Therefore, we actively seek various means to participate in the OGP to furthest extent possible. This marks Taiwan's first ever side event hosting in OGP Summit, a significant milestone in our participations. It is a result of the hard work of many individuals who have tirelessly contributed to this effort since 2020 and even further back. Well, there isn't enough time to mention or their name. Your faces are etched in my memory, but still I want to say thank you to Maria, Juan, Romeo, some OGP support team like Shuria, Ivy, as well as Rosario. We would like to express our gratitude to all the speakers here, attendants here in person, and those enjoy online. Thank you for your participation. Before we lead into the topics we discussed today, sustain the momentum for parliamentary openness in OGP Forum, I want to introduce our point of contact for Taiwan Open Parliament, our Member of the Parliament, Mr. Freddie Lin, who will deliver the opening remarks. Welcome, Freddie.
Thank you, James, and thanks all the speakers from Taiwan, and also Maria, Ramio, and Sami, and all the everybody who come to this discussion today. And it's really my honor to be here, because I can still remember that 4 years ago, I got my friends from the open community asked me to go to Canada for the summit, and I was run for my re-election. So I sent a staff, and he has shared so many things about this summit to me. And then I thought that I can participate in the summit in the upcoming days, upcoming years. But then, you know, the epidemic exploded. So I thought that in a few years, I thought that there will never be a chance for me to join the summit someday. But fortunately, this year, I'm able to be here in Estonia and personally participate one Open Parliament Day before the summit, and also witness representative from Taiwanese government to share the Taiwanese experience in the official meetings in the summit, and also to witness the side event that hosted by Taiwanese CSO. Today's topic is very important for Taiwanese parliamentary openness cause, because you might already know that we will have an upcoming election next year, and how to sustain this momentum to the next parliament, I think is very critical for Taiwan, because we all know that openness should not just be a temporary task, but it needs to be a core value of all the official sectors. And but you might also know that the momentum from the parliament to next parliament is always quite different. So we wonder how we can sustain that and how we can make sure that so many commitments that need to follow up in the next parliament can be secure to follow, can be keep moving forward. I think it's very important. So that's what we hope to learn a lot from today's discussion. And also, I hope that the experience between the official sectors and civil society during the process of Taiwanese parliamentary openness procedure that we learned from the last couple of years can be adapted by other, not just the next parliament, but also can be adapted by other official sectors, because I think we made the relationship between the CSO and the parliament no longer to be that confrontation or contradiction or even conflicts, to try to shape a joint vision. I think that's something I hope that the next parliament and also the different official sectors can adapt and can shape a better and more resilient democracy for Taiwan. And last note, I think I still have to emphasize that we strongly hope that in the near future, Taiwan could be a member state of OGP, or at least affiliated member, that I believe Taiwan can contribute more in the near future to share our experiences and to learn from each other. So I know that Maria has been quite supportive and supportive of this issue. So thank you again, and hope everybody from the member state during the discussion in the near future, in the upcoming years, can try to push a bit to get Taiwan closer to make that happen. So that's about it, but I have business to do, is to give the gifts from Parliament to our to our dear speakers.
Yes, thank you, Freddie. So this gift is Taiwan's famous snake called pineapple cake. Freddie will represent to give to our speakers.
Yes. Thank you. She can get two.
Okay, and because yeah, we have short group photos because really need to have urgent matters.
I have a cyber meeting next door.
Okay. Let's see, wait a second, over here.
Okay, 1, 2, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Freddie.
Thank you so much.
Okay, let me introduce today's speakers. First is Maria, I said Baron, but I thought in Espanol it's Baron. Maria Baron, okay, with the Global Executive Directors in the Hydrogen Legislative Board from Argentina, also the chair of the OGP Board of the Directors. And DL is an independent non-profit organization, worked for over 10 years to strengthen democracy in Latin America. We believe that kind of experience will have a lot of contribute to this side event today. And next one will be Claire. Claire is from Open Culture Foundations, one of Taiwan's CSO. She's a project manager. She do a lot of work in Taiwan's Open Parliament multi-stakeholder forum. The next one will be Sammy. Sammy is the executive director from the Parliamentary Network Africa. PN Africa is a civil society organized with the vision of promoting open parliament across Africa. So we want to learn a lot from Sammy also. The next one we will introduce is Rabio, the program manager at Westminster Foundation for Democracy. Also, he's an Ireland researcher, so maybe he can give a lot of insight for this panel. The last one will be the Cai Bingquan. He's the director of Public Relations Division, secretary in Taiwan Legislative Yuan. So, although this past few days I have been keep introducing like DL and PM Africa was the CCW in Argentina in the Africa. But actually, I understand it's actually CCW take a benefit from this because we are actually working toward DL and PM Africa's achievement, connecting the PMO from various Asia countries and collaborating cross-border project. So today we want to learn a lot from Latin America and Africa's experience. So I will pass my microphone to the first speakers. Will be Maria. Okay, Maria, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, James. And I would like to thank my colleagues here on the stage, especially Ravio and Ben, I'm sorry, Sami, that we work a lot with every week, every year, the day-to-day, and Ravio specifically, and Rinka there in the public were instrumental for us to be here in Estonia this week, because we, as you know, organized Open Parliament Day, which was on Monday, and many of you were here. I also want to recognize some of the MPs here in the public as well, from Ghana, from Estonia, and from Taiwan as well. So, and of course, last but not least, my friend Annabelle Cruz, who's here and is the chair of the steering committee of OGP. So thank you for being here, all of you, and it's a really curated, I think, public to be in this discussion. Having said that, so James asked me to give you a little bit of context of why sort of the Open Parliament movement started, or how did we work to be here today. So I would only showcase a little bit of it, and it's the initiative that OGP put together around, and spearheaded, I would have to say, by a Chilean senator around 2015, who said, you know, this is, OGP is great, but we need to get sort of the real decision makers of the countries who are the MPs, because a lot of the commitments that are in the different action plans of the different countries require what we call legislative action. So the executive wants to make decisions, but they need sort of the discussion and the passage of a specific bill by the parliament. And so if we don't include the parliaments in this whole thing, open government or openness, then it won't work. So as from that moment, OGP, and with spearheading behind this, the senator, they put together sort of a pilot policy to see if it worked. And so with a couple of pages and several paragraphs, they put together sort of an idea that parliaments could create commitments to, and add them to the open government plan, or create an open, what we call today, open parliament plan. And so we started off more in an informal way, I have to say, and several parliaments from the Americas joined, and then they left. As we know, parliaments and governments get 2 steps forwards, sometimes 1 step backwards, or sometimes like 5 steps backwards. Let's not get into that. And so originally this policy was thought for only like 2 years and a half. And since many MPs got together, we created sort of a, we'd say, cohort of some of them are here today. So the champions of the parliaments that want their own parliaments or their own spaces of work to be really in the community of openness. We decided after 2 years and a half, more or less, to sort of make it a formal policy within OGP. And that's why today you have like a formal policy on local governments, on the justice system, or the justice sort of pillar, and you have also a formal idea of how OGP wants to approach the parliament. And now it's a steady, formal policy within OGP. And like I said before, you have two ways of approaching openness in parliaments within OGP. One is you can co-create commitments and add them to the main government action plan. Or you can co-create with civil society that is related to the parliament a specific and very curated and selected open parliament plan. And today in the world we have both. And it depends on, of course, the politics and the context of each country, but sometimes if the executive is from one color party and the parliament is from another color party, sometimes it's better to do separate thing. And many times when it's a joint thing and they share public officials and they share a common idea, sometimes they do a joint action plan. And so I have to say, maybe to give you a couple of numbers, today 83 districts, let's say, have either action plans, parliament action plans, or commitments related to parliament. Now, as you know, there's only 75 countries. So this means that these 83 include 14, I think it's 14 or 18 local governments. So the locals have already, with their idea of open state, have already joined sort of this movement of open parliament. And it's, if we look back, we can say today that it's been growing really, really steadily and really fast. But we can say it's a steady movement with a couple of peaks going up. But really, it's a steady thing, and so that for us is a good initiative. So that said, of context a little bit, and maybe they'll showcase some examples. You asked me to talk about a little bit about networks. And as you know, in Latin America, we started the Latin American Network for Legislative Transparency, this sort of long and unmarketed name called, it started in 2010. And what we did is we got together from Argentina and my organization and another organization from Mexico, and we said we need to work together because otherwise this sort of approach to the parliaments in a bilateral way at the national level won't work so much. And so we started off with 5 countries in 2010, and today in 2023 we have 50. And so what we did is we realized that we needed sort of data to measure our approach to the parliament. So we decided to create an assessment tool. Imperfect, but an assessment tool. So that approach with the parliaments ended up being like, you need to do this and you need to open up yourself. And they came back with, we're already open. And so, no, that needs to go down with data. And we need to measure if the parliaments are open or not. Now, the methodology of that data is imperfect by definition, and it can be imperfect, and it's fine. But there's some reforms that parliaments need to do, especially in Latin America or in our region. That assessment has been done in Latin America already 6 times. So we've done it once every 2 years. So we have a lot of data today. And when we measure 4 things, data on the normative or the laws that they have passed both for the specific country or for the inside regarding openness, and for the inside of the parliament. We have data and have measured the legislative process, how open it is, if they have consultation or not, if people can access the documents, the votes, the debates, the committee meetings, the amendments, whatever. Another sort of pillar that we measure is sort of the administration of the parliament. So all the numbers, if they are published or not, and with what frequency, which is really important, the frequency that data is available to the people, and also how much they value citizen participation, so how open they are for participation itself. That has been sort of our motto, so measuring and that allowing us to have a stronger relationship on advocacy for openness in the Parliament. So along the years, now today we can say 3 things that have been really, really relevant for us as organizations. We're measuring 15 countries, but we're around 24 organizations. This means that each country has, most of the countries have more than one organization. And so what we can say today is 4 things. The first is we have created a relationship with the world where you can access data or whatever you want about the parliaments in Latin America with one email or one phone call. So we have one voice. You call whoever is the chair of the network and you can access whatever you want of whatever parliament of Latin America. And that allows us to be really, the doors be open to us because of that. So we are in very interesting discussion spaces only because we represent each other. So now it's Directorio, for example, in my case, we are chair today, but maybe tomorrow it's another organization and it's fine. 1. 2, we have the data. So we have the data of all of the countries. Of course, we started off with 5, we're 14 now, so for the 5 original countries, we have 12 years of data, but and others we have 5, 6, 10, whatever. And that gives us sort of a lot of sort of robust arguments to advocate with the people, the journalists, but with the parliaments as well. And the third, this is the best, being together and co-creating together and helping each other together is the best advocacy tool that we have found. Not only because we're together, but also to have, and we mentioned this in the Open Parliament Day, it gives us sort of the possibility to work in what we call sort of bad cup, good cup. So at the national level, those organizations are working with Parliament, but we have that regional perspective, and we know where that Parliament is at a specific moment in time and where it should be or where it was, and so we can sort of approach the Parliament with a more systemic view, and that is really powerful, we have found. And then the last thing is we have understood, I think, that we need this to happen in other regions of the world. And so that's why we spoke many times with our friend Sami here, for him to elaborate a network in Africa, at least in one of the regions of Africa, and then an assessment tool as well. And that is why we have talked many times and extensively with James, so that something similar happens in Asia as well, in any of the regions of Asia. Of course, when we say this, it's really facilitated to us in Latin America because we all speak the same language and it's really easy for us to connect. And so there's a lot of people that only know Spanish and we can connect the same, and it's much more difficult in Asia to connect because there's a lot of barriers. But still, we will help you to accomplish it and create your own assessment tools so that then in the future we can compare ourselves, not only our experiences, but our approaches and the different creative initiatives that our parliaments, yes, are doing every day in any matter of their institution. So with that, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Maria. I think the biggest achievement today is I got Maria's words. She will help Asia to do the networking. Thank you, Maria. So we have for a lot of point, it's about networking. To sustain the momentum, maybe it's not only for one country's, one parliament can do that. Maybe it's a good solution for having networking in the regional to compare which is doing the better, which is need to reform again. So that's when we go back to Taiwan, we have a lot of work to do the networking in the Asia regions. Okay, next, I'm trying to let everybody know the context of Taiwan's parliament, political environment, and what actual plan doing right now. I will try to let my best colleague in the OPMSF, Claire, to explain in 10 minutes. It's very hard work for her, but I trust she has this kind of ability. Thank you, Claire.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you, all of you here. So today, is this loud enough? Okay. So today I will share the situation of Taiwan Open Parliament and AP. And I know that Taiwan is regarded and we are truly a democratic country. And I know that we are doing a good job, but come on, we live in reality. So sure, we will have some challenges. So today I will focus on sharing about these challenges, difficulties we have met in the Open Parliament and AP in Taiwan. And we really want to hear back your suggestions. So next slide, please. Or I can use this. Sorry. Yeah. So I work in OCF, Open Culture Foundation, and our foundation believes in that by open resource data, the collaboration channel we have, we can all build a stronger democracy. So OCF is also the civic convener of the MSF in Open Parliament and AP in Taiwan. And so you can see that in Taiwan, our MSF in Open Parliament are constructed by CSO, like some organizations like OCF and CCW, and also some individuals from civil society, just like Warren and Billion. They also attend in today's event. So, and also our MSF are also, there are some people from Parliament State and also MP. Together, I think we really have done a great job when we draft the first NAP in Taiwan. I mean, the civil society has drafted down an open Google Doc about what are our expectations from the Open Parliament. And the civil society really did discuss about if this expectation can be met in the Open Parliament NAP. So the Parliament also replied about what they can do and maybe what they cannot do in the first 4 years of the NAP. And after the draft this NAP, they also publish it for gather some suggestions, open review for every Taiwanese. So in this co-creation process, we have done a great job, and we are now in the implementation phase. So that's the phase I want to focus on, then the challenges we have now. Okay. It's okay. So there are 5 sections about commitments in our NAP. You can see James just explained it's about transparency, openness, participation, digitalization, and literacy. So it mainly focuses on the infrastructure of the Open Parliament. So it means that it might be a little far away from our daily lives for average citizens. So that's also related to another challenges. I will explain later. So to follow up all these commitments, Civic and SF are divided into 5 groups to follow up the progress. So our challenges can be divided into 3. And today, because of time limit, I will focus on the first one that is difficult for Civic and SF members to track the implementation of our NAP. And also, the challenges I just mentioned that the commitments is a little far away from daily lives of Taiwan citizens. So So that makes them also feel unfamiliar and they don't know how to attend in this OP National Action Plan in Taiwan. And also the last one but not the least is like our MP shows lower participation in our NAP. So now I will focus on the first challenge we have. It's like you can see the graphics. It's a beautiful design about our civic MSF. Like in the beginning, we really want to have us more citizens to attend in the MSF with us, so that we can engage more citizens to know about the value of open parliament. So for every 6 months, we will re-elect the new MSF from civil societies. And at the same time, there are also some MSF will stay with the new MSF, so they can inherit the knowledge and the content to the new MSF. So by this design, we really hope that we can recruit as many as civil societies participants, and as well as to let them know what we do in MSF. But it turned out that things are not that perfect. In this kind of inheritance process, we missed so many knowledge, content, and also inside the parliament, the staff also switched to different positions. So that means when the new MSF come to their position and also the parliament staff, they might didn't really understand the original expectation of each commitment in an AP. So that make us have some difficulty when we want to align with each other. Also, the second reason for some, you can see the form is the original form we use in our bi-monthly meeting. I'm sorry, it's written in traditional Chinese. So in that form, we can see that Parliament staff really did difficult work to organize what they did for the past 2 months, to tidy up the progress of each commitment. But for civic MSF, we don't do like daily work with the parliament staff, right? Because we all have to work different in our daily position. So for this bi-monthly meeting, we cannot really understand what they did, and we don't know the details. So that makes us really difficult to have question, to have discussion with the parliament staff. So there are many times that we have the meetings just sitting there and to hear that the MP, the staff report what they did, but we don't know how to cooperate with them. And also for the parliament staff, I believe that they don't know how to cooperate with us either. Yeah, so that's the problem. So how to solve this problem? So OCF launched a research and we discussed how to improve this tracking implementation mechanism in NAP. So yeah, that was the situation back in 2022 because we don't have something like SOP and clear guidelines. So I think maybe it's because of we don't have a clear roles and responsibilities, like the expectation of what kind of characters do parliament staff hope from civic MS to give. So here are some solutions, and you can see from the top to down, we have 5 different layers of solution. For the first one, we think that we need to find the values of different stakeholders of an AP. For example, we want the MPs to attend in this kind of meetings in an AP more, so we need to persuade them what kind of values they can get to attend in this OP and NAP. We really have some problems like for the MP, if they cannot make their voters, make citizens feel open parliament is really a great thing they should do. So will they want to spend their time to attend in this kind of meeting with us? So maybe we need to persuade citizens the value of the open parliament for the first step we have to do. And also for the parliament staff, we want to make them understand that maybe to implement this NAP, at first it will add more work on your job, but in the long term, you can cooperate with civil societies. So it will lower down your burden in the long term. And also for CSOs, we want to make more CSOs understand if we build a good infrastructure of our parliament, so it can make us our promoting issues job more easier. Yeah, and also for the other layers, we have to define the roles and responsibility. For the, I will explain more details in the next slide. And so our goal is that we need to make anyone to review all these consensus and the original expectation of each commitment. No matter they jump in which session, in which timing, they can also follow us. Yeah, so that's the thing we did for the past 6 months. So after research, we elect leaders of each group in a civic MSF. So these leaders of the groups, they collect suggestions from their group members. So that means they need to discuss about the expectation of each commitment. So if they don't know, they need to figure out by maybe asking the first phase of the civic MSF, the one who draft the commitments at the beginning. Yeah, so by this process, the MSF can align with the expectation with the parliament state again. And also they need to make sure the mechanism, cooperation mechanism. So that means that before the bi-monthly meeting, the civic MSF, if they need some information, resource, data from the parliament, they can just ask it from the contact window in the parliament. Because before in the bi-monthly meeting, we really don't know what to ask and what to discuss. So this kind of meeting is a little a waste of our time because we don't know how to discuss. Yeah, and if we really make sure every process happens before a meeting, it means that we can maybe come out with some conclusion in this bi-monthly meeting. And also we want to create a format to discuss the commitments. So that is Trello. We made some format on it. We post every commitment on it and with the tags to see that if it meets the expectation of the civic MSF. Yeah, so that's the next slide. And I also want to focus on that biggest challenge we have now. It's we want to have the second NAP in another 4 years. So that's the goal we are fighting for now.
Thank you, Claire. So it's obviously that we want this momentum keep moving that, but we have a lot of hard working, especially we're not working from CSO side. We have co-create with the LY staff, but right now we want to have more MPs to join and discussion about these kind of issues. So because in our agenda, we said we will give a 10 minutes break because it's a little bit delayed for this side event. So right now we will have a short break and we will get back at 3 o'clock. And please don't envy the speaker who got the pineapple cakes because we serve everyone each in front of the desk. So please get some of the pineapple cake, have some tea, and we will get back at 3 o'clock. Thank you.
Yeah, it's probably like 10 to 15 minutes by car. So yeah, basically throughout the night.
Thank you.
Grace, also bring you to the country and region. Only a month, 1 month old. Newborn, yeah. It's a wonderful global Chinese.
Yeah, I mean,
Are you going to go through the 常常看到你的名字在我的脸书上，谢谢。木子，放心的，手艺。那我们先，对不起，我们先离开。谢谢你们今天来，然后我请这位同学来，我 see you 10个字嘛，谢谢。到时候希望你们来。Thank you for joining us for lunch. Thank you. Okay, take care. Take care. 谢谢啊，谢谢。
I love to want to.
Yes, yes. You want to
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. No, but I was telling them that
my view is that it's even some good progress.
Yeah,
some people are not there.
They're not very well.
Yeah.
For now, in the country, yeah. I don't like that.
Pressure. So at the moment it is Mina, myself, and
Oh, where's Mina?
she left yesterday. But she also did not get her luggage before she left.
So what are you going to do?
So she told them they should bring it to Accra. It's so bad.
That's for Mina there. I'm sure she'll be angry.
Hey. I'm sure she's going to give them, but myself, I'm also going to give them some real trouble. I mean, it's not proper. Yeah, exactly. So I'll send them all my receipts.
Yeah.
And then even for the delay, because, I mean, technically, if the reason for my coming here is the open Parliament, and which was the chief reason for my coming?
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
And
it's
couldn't make it.
Yeah.
I like it to go easily. No, they have to do conversation.
Yeah.
At least one free air flight to Argentina back.
Especially around sort of inclusive practices.
Let me just grab something.
That is one area where we've committed resources towards research and beyond inclusion guide. So that's a real nice resource. Yeah. Yeah, just sort of to implement inclusion. So yeah, it's useful. Certainly, I mean, one would strengthen specifically autistic transparency. One would strengthen just sort of having like if you're looking to engage sort of public opinion, just having that sort of attractive to people. Yeah, definitely. And I know it's come up quite a bit. How can you sort of translate it? No, I wasn't. We co-hosted a session with an organization. And one of our stations. Yeah, so I mean that was right. Just to get people, both get them interested into fairly significant education. Yeah, I mean, one option is just to sort of different levels of depth, to design something like this. Survey. Summit?
Yeah. I mean, parts of it, like.
Yeah, I was happy about this. Our organization's notes and the events we took place. Well, I'm heading Saturday morning. Family and friends of the group.
Hello everyone. We are going back through our sessions.
Yeah. The gray sky and this day. Did you try the pineapple?
It doesn't taste like pineapple.
No, but it grows in you.
Yeah.
In the beginning was
Because obviously it's like it's cooked down quite a lot,
Yeah.
so it's obviously it loses, which is loses that.
and James was next to me. And I was
nice.
Yeah,
It is very nice. I was expecting more tang.
Yeah.
And that was very distinctive.
Okay, hope everyone enjoy the pineapple cake. Okay, thank you. So our next speaker will be Rabio. Rabio right now he works in the sorry. Sammy go first, right? Sorry. Our next speaker will be Sammy. Sammy's doing actually maybe the same thing that Maria is doing now, but Sammy is more experienced than Taiwan, than Asia region, of course. So it's time that Sammy to share the experience about the open parliaments in the Africa. So I will give the microphone to Sammy right now. Okay, Sammy, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Great. Thanks, James. Let me start by thanking very much the organizers for putting this together and for inviting me. I'm honored to be part of this, the Open Parliament Multi-Stakeholder Forum. I think it's been, listening to the presentation that was made by Claire, it shows some work that has been done, you know, and for us, we're happy that this kind of progress has been achieved. So to Citizens Community Watch, Directorial, and then of course the folks at Open Culture Foundation, thanks for inviting us. I think that the theme for this conversation, you know, the bit about sustaining the momentum for parliamentary openness and OGP reforms, is an apt one. And of course, whilst I was reflecting on the topics, you know, the subtopics that, you know, were part of the write-up, you know, the issues around what will be our imagination for openness, what efforts will we have to take to sustain, you know, the momentum, and then of course the challenges for continuity. I thought that this gave, you know, some very interesting areas for me to share reflections, especially having worked with parliaments across 13 African countries, you know, civil society in these countries as well, trying to engage on matters relating to parliamentary openness. However, it's important that from the very onset, I indicate that from our experiences, a one-size-fits-all situation does not apply, you know. So what may have been very successful, you know, in the case of Ghana, or in the case of Kenya, or any other country, may not necessarily be the same kind of situation for Taiwan. And so whereas we share experiences, we are also minded to remind ourselves that country context matters, you know, the local situation matters, and so we must learn the best practices, yes, but we must also situate it within the context of what the local situation is like. And that's why I was happy that in the structure of the presentations, you know, I'm coming after Claire's presentation because it gave a very good understanding of what a local context are, and to be able to also guide some of the reflections that I get to share. So, you know, one of the approaches that we have been thinking about and implementing in Africa around open parliament is what we have called the 360-degree approach to open parliament. And we call it a 360-degree approach to open parliament because we draw a compass and we're able to point 4 different very important stakeholder groups that must necessarily be part of this conversation, in our opinion, to make the conversation successful. Parliaments themselves, citizens, civil society, and that's not to say that citizens are not part of the, you know, entire civil society conversation, but by that component we mean civil society, parliamentary monitoring organizations, you know, organizations that are working and engaging and monitoring parliaments, and then the media. One component that also in many of our open parliament conversations we tend to forget, you know, in many of the parliamentary advocacy work we tend to forget about, but they play a very critical role from our experiences if we are to find successes with this. And what do I mean by these, you know, 4 components making up the 360-degree approach? We notice that for parliaments, getting members of parliament to understand the importance of open parliament and for them to, be willing to get involved can be very difficult. Of course, at best you may get a few champions, who may push the agenda, who may be very interested in what have you. In the case of Ghana, for example, Honorable Bejra, who is in the audience, have for the past decade or more, been very active with open parliament. But sometimes he feels like a lone ranger, having to bring his colleagues along. It becomes a bit, difficult. So that has been a challenge. But we argue that if Honorable Bejra is no longer in Parliament, for which, of course, he has the opportunity to secure another 4-year mandate in the elections next year, but if he's no longer in Parliament, he leaves with all the over a decade experience and engagement around open Parliament, and it goes with him. How do we ensure that the knowledge that he has, the whole conversation around open Parliament, is institutionalized within the parliamentary institution itself? And that is why we have always argued and encouraged that in these conversations, the staff of Parliament, the institution of Parliament, must also be brought along, so that the concentration is not only about the members of Parliament. Of course, they are the ones who move the actions. You need them at high levels to be able to get things moving. I'm happy with what the team has been also doing with Freddie in Taiwan. But we also need the staffers in Parliament to be able to also buy into this. Most of the times we realize that their own knowledge and understanding about open Parliament sometimes is very limited. And we need to, as part of the conversation, bring a cadre of staff of Parliament up to speed with these things. Because for them, in many of the parliaments that we work with, they retire, in Parliament. And so they're going to be there forever. I mean, for a very long time. And MPs will come and MPs will go, but these secretariats that will support open Parliament conversations will stay. And so it's one of the things that we encourage very much. So yes, by all means, let's get a cadre of members of Parliament, to be able to support this. But let's also get parliamentary staff, involved in these things, because it helps to be able to drive it. Sometimes members of Parliament are very busy. We know their work can be very inundating, but you have these staff who are allies of this open Parliament conversation. They can open the doors, make sure that things are working very fine. So it was a very good, useful lesson that we learned across the various countries that we work in. Connecting open Parliament conversations also to citizens and the priorities of citizens is extremely important. For the MP, the interest is the next elections. He wants to win the next elections and come back to Parliament, especially for places where it's a pure first past the post situation, like in the case of Ghana, the Gambia, Sierra Leone, many of the other countries that we work in, or even for places where it's a party list and what have you. The first decision on getting people elected or getting the percentages is from the citizenry. And so we must be able to find ways to connect the open Parliament conversations to the everyday life of the citizens, so that citizens feel that this is about us, so they don't see the OGP and open Parliament conversation as an abstract arrangement somewhere. A group of people once in a while will go for summits, post pictures online and tell us they've been to Estonia, and then it's the same group of people and the same group of people, and we don't, get to see what is in there for us. Because it is only when citizens get to see what is in there for them that they get interested and they get to see why it is important. So let me give a classical example. We talk about accountability as a component of openness. Yeah? We talk about transparency as a component of openness. We talk about citizens' participation as a component of openness. When citizens know that as part of OGP and open Parliament, it encourages for more citizens' engagement with their members of Parliament. If we do it right, we'll have MPs now come down to you to have conversations with you, to learn about your priorities, to tell you about the parliamentary agenda, and have you also contribute to it. And then they will be able to get the things that matter to you, so they can take it back to Parliament, your priority issues, the issues at the local level. Then they will see that these are conversations that is not away from them, but conversations that gets very close to them. So citizens are very important. For civil society organizations, which is a third angle for the 360-degree, quadrants that I spoke about, is that we learn that, there may be the CCWs of our times, working in Taiwan, doing out and out Congress watch work. There may be the PN Africa of our times doing out and out parliamentary work. But there are also the Transparency Internationals in the various countries who engages Parliament occasionally on anti-corruption related matters, sunshine legislation, what have you. There may be the Amnesty Internationals in various countries engaging on matters relating to human rights and what have you. And so we thought about civil society involvement in open parliament, not just from the perspective of out and out parliamentary monitoring organizations, but civil society who engages parliament, generally. And so we in Africa have really moved away from the conversation of parliamentary monitoring organizations, PMOs, which usually sends the signal of monitoring parliament, so who watches the watchman, that kind of thing, to parliamentary engagement and monitoring organizations, because there are organizations that also engages parliament, not just necessarily doing out and out, kind of monitoring. And this is important. And so in all, at the moment, in 13 African countries, we have what we call national networks of parliamentary engagement and monitoring organizations, who are a group of civil society organizations that work regularly with parliaments, coming together, and then they have a stronger force in engaging with parliaments regularly. And so the example of Ghana, for example, if the Parliament of Ghana needs civil society support on a work that they are doing, let's say on extractives, they reach out to the PMO network in Ghana and say, look, can you get us your colleagues who are doing extractives work, your colleagues who are doing gender work, human rights work, to send us papers on this thing that we are working on? Can they support us in the research work? That's the kind of reputation and relationship that has been built. And for us, it is because we show that this is a group of civil society that have expertise in these areas and can be able to do massively if we. The last set of the quadrant, usually we leave them out in our conversation, is the media. And sometimes we think about them as an afterthought. The group of people who we just need to be able to send out our press releases, and make it, vibrant. So they are just the vuvuzelas that we would use to blow up our achievements and what have you. But we see them as an integral part of the open parliament conversation for two reasons. Number one, journalists report from parliaments, especially those who are part of the parliamentary, press group. And they are one of the first points of access to parliamentary information, because they observe parliament on a daily basis, they report, and so when they understand these nuances of open parliament, because for many of the journalists we engaged, they had absolutely no idea what open parliament was about, what OGP was about, and so we needed to also put in efforts to get them to understand these conversations and to be interested in those conversations. And so this 360-degree approach of Parliament itself, citizens, civil society, and the media have kind of served us, quite well. And perhaps to be able to bring this to a close, as I'm also watching the time and mindful of the time that I was giving. Beyond this work at a country level, of organizing around these 4 quadrant areas, like Maria did indicate for the Latin American space, we have also been very we've been putting a lot of efforts within the African space in creating an African network of parliamentary monitoring organizations, which we are honored to be hosting in our office at Parliamentary Network Africa in Accra. But not only are we hosting the network of parliamentary monitoring and engagement organizations, we also host the network of African parliamentary press, journalists who report from various national parliaments. So over 30 parliaments across Africa, civil society working with them, legislators also working with them, because we believe that these are the fulcrum around which the open parliament conversation can go on. And just like Latin America, we also publish the Africa Open Parliament Index. And the idea really, Maria expatiated on this, they were very supportive in it. Last year was the first index that was launched. The idea really is that once every 2 years, let's assess what various parliaments are doing under the core concepts of open parliaments: transparency, accountability, citizens' participation. Because when we went around with parliaments, they told us that we will be happy if you can have a benchmark that compares us with ourselves. Don't come and say that you are comparing the Ghana Parliament's openness with the US Congress or with the Westminster Parliament, because they may have so many backroom staff working with them. We only have one parliamentary researcher for every member of parliament. Some countries do not have any at all. So don't compare apples and oranges. So we're very happy to take a comparison that ranks the various parliaments. Parliament did their own self-assessments, civil society did an assessment of the situation, we put them together, and then 2 years down the line, we see what the progress has been. But to leave it all, and this is just to provide a few 3-point recommendations to some of the challenges that Claire had identified. One is that we tried very hard to link the whole open parliament conversation to the priorities of parliament, so that when parliament is engaging with civil society around open parliament, they do not see it as extra work. So parliament has their own strategic plan that they are implementing. These are the priorities of parliament. How does open parliament conversation makes them achieve the things that they want to achieve, so that they know that in doing this, we are doing the kind of work that we ourselves have set, to be doing. Apart from that, also, we're trying to create that value proposition for members of parliament to know what open parliament means for them as individual members of parliament, and their electoral fortunes, because, like I said, these things are about the next elections for the politician, and so they are thinking about, why do you want to engage me in 6 hours meetings when I can engage my constituents and win votes? So what is in there for me? And last but not least, we understand that the bureaucracies of parliament can be very difficult. So right from the very onset, action plans are co-created using the OGP standard, so that everybody knows that we are around the table together. We agree to do this together. It is not a matter of civil society agreeing on a set of issues and now coming to push it down our throat, or parliament agreeing on a set of issues and trying to push it down our throat. We agreed on this together, so in implementation, we are in it together. So these are a few reflections, on thinking about the topics, and I'm hoping that in the interactions that follow, we can be able to share more going forward.
Thank you, Sammy. From Sammy's, I just review from Taiwan Open Parliamentary Plan right now. For the OPMSF, I don't think we don't have press media, right? So maybe we lost this link. It's the media. Then we can take back to Taiwan, think about how that media to join to this OPMSF. And thank you for Sammy's sharing. Another thing that just what Taiwan is doing right now, but we still need to have more experience from other countries like Sammy's doing. So next speaker will be Ravio. Ravio represents, I would say, he's now working for WFD, but he used to use a lot of the research for the Open Parliament Action Plan, because he's the IR researchers. So he do a lot of the research to understanding how Open Parliament Action Plan work in the individual countries. So maybe he can share some spatial perspective. Okay, so I'll add the time to Ravio. Ravio, thank you.
Thanks, James. Hi, everyone. I'm actually reading this order of speaking because Xavier basically stole off my talking points. So let me just, regather my thoughts again. No thanks to Sammy, but let me start with saying that I do work for the Westminster Foundation for Democracy. Myself and my colleague there, the one standing there, Erika, we coordinate our open parliament programs across 35+ offices across the world. But I'm based in Asia, I'm based in Jakarta, Indonesia. But on top, in addition to that, I also have this, other role as an IAM researcher. For those of you who have been involved in OGP, you're probably, familiar with IAM researcher. That's, the people who bother you every year for interviews, for correspondence, asking for information, right? And then suddenly we release reports that say, based on this person and that person's statements, they didn't do well, right? So basically, we decide your fate in the partnership in that sense, right? But an anecdote I'd like to start with is that every time from my time, so I've been involved in the open government space for 8 years now. I started with the OGP support unit running the summit actually, so it's a bit of a fresh air for me to be in the stage instead of behind the stage, right? But one thing that people often ask to our researcher is, how do we go beyond usual participation, right? Because that's sort of the heart of anything that is open parliament, open government, right? Participation, making this decision-making process, policy-making process, extend beyond the closed door meetings between MPs, between ministers, and all of those government officials. And like my response is always like, why are you overthinking it, right? Because like when you look at action plans across the world, what people keep doing even today, right? People are coming up with new tools, new websites, new platforms, new applications, like all new things. Like they're calling it all sorts of different things, right? Like at the end of the day, really, like participation is not about the tools, right? It's really about, like sometimes, for example, in some countries that have research, the citizens are saying that it's not that they don't get the tools, it's not that the tools are not accessible to them. It's really that they're not interested to participate in this government process because they've tried that before and nothing came out of that participation, right? So at the end of it, at the end of the day, participation is really, the onus is unfortunately still bigger on the government to actually deliver on that participation. Like, if you invite people for some consultation, then at the very least, and that brings me to the next point of minimum standards, right? So in OGP, there's this participation and co-creation standards, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. And actually, during the whole strategy conversation of OGP, I was one of the people who was, basically annoying the support unit, saying that we should move beyond minimum standards. Like, why not go, why not ask the members to achieve to some, at least, like medium or like ideal standards, right? Because minimum standards sound like it's, as long as they do, basically the minimum standards, if you read it as it is right now, right? Basically, they need to have a website, right, that contains all of, that publishes their open government, open parliament process, and then they need to publish at least one information every 6 months. Such a low standard, right? But even so, many countries still fail to meet those minimum standards, right? So we need to start asking, right, in terms of open parliament processes, etc. Like the one distinction I keep noticing is that, especially in Asia region, it's that the process is completely separate. So the parliament creates their own open parliament action plan that is not engaged at all with the open government process, and what ends up happening is that there's a disconnect in the reform, right? So let me give you an example. So for example, in Indonesia, Indonesia is a co-founding member of OGP, right? So they've been in partnership for 12 years now, 7th action plan right now. One of the key successes of Indonesia that a lot of countries actually sort of like copied but improved on was the Lapor platform, which is a public complaints platform where citizens can basically talk directly to and like if they say that this section of a public road has been damaged for months, but like no reconstruction has been done, right? And that complaint goes directly to the ministry or to the department that is directly responsible for that district area, to do immediate renovation. So that's basically what Indonesia did at first, right? But then what happened is, because the keyword in the panel today is sustaining the momentum, right? What happens is, when like what Maria said, like what Sammy said earlier, right? When the transition of leadership happens, the next government, the next minister was like basically not to name names, like the next minister was just like, well, that was the product of the previous minister. I wouldn't want to improve on that because then people will say that that's his legacy, not mine. So he started a whole other thing, right? So really, like it's not that it's not that complicated, right? Because we keep saying it, like it's not like we don't have the answer. We do. It's just that we need to be willing to engage with politicians, because that's where it gets very murky, and it gets very like there's a lot of navigation that you need to do to get political commitment to deliver, right? So we suggested that what you should do, like in the next action plan, right? Engage with the relevant committee in the parliament and ask the parliament to develop a bill that would basically institutionalize the whole public complaints process, right? Instead of a ministerial level regulation, because when it's ministerial regulation, right? Other ministries don't feel like, like you're my peer. You don't get to regulate me. Your regulation applies to your ministry and your subordinate agencies across the country, right? Because it's a big country, like there's like 575 administrative divisions. Same thing, like in Malawi recently, I did a report with the support unit looking at the approval of foreign debts, foreign loan applications by the government, right? Basically, the commitment was basically about creating a whole new committee process that would add another layer of scrutiny for government in order to get approval for their foreign loan applications. And the problem with that was really that there's already an existing process in the budget committee, right? Where every budget proposal goes before the committee, and unless they approve it, like even like if it's like even if it's an emergency loan for the government to run the country, like it wouldn't be they cannot go with it if the budget committee doesn't approve it. So instead, what happens in many open parliament action plans is that when they know that like an existing process that already responds to the problem doesn't work, instead of improving on that existing process, they create a whole new other process, right? So they created a new something like foreign loan committee, loan approval committee, something, right? Subcommittee. So what ends up happening is that you need to, allocate, and then, when it comes to implementation, people start saying things like, oh, we couldn't deliver it because there were no budget allocation, there's no resources. I'm like, of course you don't, because like it's an existing process. Who would want to repeat, to allocate resources to basically something that already exists, right? So it just feels like, it's sort of like a devious cycle in that sense. Like what Sammy said is a 360 process, right? I think one example that is really good, and Sammy's probably tired of hearing this because I've told him about this a few times already. Like, think about the corruption perception index, for example, right? Something that PI does every year. That's pretty much it, right? Like, all Transparency International does is collect information, collect evidence, and then rank countries, score countries based on the corruption perception from the past year. Like, they don't do, they're not trying to advocate for any laws specifically in a country. They're not trying, they're not engaging with the government through the index, right? They use, but like what happens is that, like what Semi said, right? There's a disengagement between media organizations and the open government space, and that includes open parliament space, in the sense that the media does not create the urgency for officials or parliamentarians to respond to any of the reforms. So let's think of, like corruption perception index. Like in Mongolia, for example, in the part, they just achieved a historic low score ever since they were included in the corruption perception index in the early 2000s, last year. And what happened is the media in Mongolia and around and in the Central Asia region made, basically made the historic low score of Mongolia on CPI the headlines for weeks, right? To the point that the government had no other option but to respond to it by, basically revamping the entire anti-corruption strategy. Like, they literally released a new anti-corruption strategy. Like, it sounds so simple, right? But it is simple. Like, public policy, like, could be complicated. Like, in many parts, when you make it into an open process, it's pretty straightforward, I'd say. It's just that when there's disconnect between civil society, with the media, with government, with parliament, you're just doing your own thing, and then like you have shared objectives, like you're not sharing any of the steps towards that objective. So the media is doing is doing A, B, C. The civil society are doing D, E, G, D, E, F. But at the end of the day, they're working towards the same thing, but there's no conversation between those different stakeholders. So the same thing, right? Like Sami said, they're working on a parliamentary open parliament index in Africa, which is great, like, because usually, right? Usually, government and parliaments, they really respond to like this race to the top incentives, right? They're like, oh, if I'm like 5th now, I want to be number 1. If I'm like in the bottom 10 now, I need to get out of that bottom 10 and be in the middle at least, right? That's why we talk about things like upper middle income country, we talk about high income country, because everyone wants to be at the top, right? But then the only reason people want to raise to the top is if there's some urgency around it, and that principle applies here as well. Like, there's no urgency around open parliament, around open government, to be fair, to be honest, right? And I mean, I'm saying that being someone who's sort of like dedicated his entire professional life in this space, right? Because like nobody talks about it, like what Semi says, right? And it's not even like a sophisticated step towards it. It's really just about when you talk about participation, like I said earlier, right, in the beginning of when I started speaking. When we talk about participation, it's really just, for example, when we measure the success of it, nobody's collecting baseline data, for example. Like, people talk about, oh, we created this platform, and like in 2 years we've been able to collect 1 million feedback from citizens on policy. And I'm like, yeah, but like, what was the status quo before you started, right? Because nobody's seeing changes. Like, we talk about all these numbers, numerical measurements, etc. But like, for the citizens, all they care about, give me 1 more minute. But like, all they care about is really what affects them directly. A good example of that is in Indonesia, my organization, OGP, we are working on a climate bill right now with the parliament. Like the first few months, it wasn't really connecting with the citizens through the open parliament process, and we realized that we were doing it all wrong, because like every time we talk about the climate bill, right, we were talking to the citizens about how, like it's important for us to avoid getting to the 2 degrees Celsius increase in global temperature rise. We were talking about how, drought, will affect the production of crops, like food security, right? All of these big headlines. And then like we realized like nobody was responding to it, even though it's basically a problem that would render the whole planet inhabitable, right? And then we realized like what do people respond to, right? Things that are close to them. So we started speaking to, when we talk to farmers, we talk to them, have you experienced any crop failure in the past couple of years? And they say yes, yeah, because the weather is unpredictable, water is, irrigation is unavailable. So we're like, you do know that that's not natural, right? That's an effect of climate change. When we talk about people in urban areas, we talk about how you realize that it's the dry season, but we have flooding like every few months. And you do know that that's not regular, right? That's not natural. That's because of the impact of climate change. So like you sort of like have to tailor the way you speak to the citizens, and like in open parliament, I think that's the strength of it. But like because nobody's speaking to one another, civil society is doing their own thing, government is doing their own thing, parliament doing their own thing, media not engaged at all. So eventually it's just sort of like what Sammy said, right? Like sometimes that's literally what some critics have said, like to me directly as well. Like, it feels like you're just going to a summit every year, and then like and then like by the time I'm wondering what happened with that, like you're in the next summit. And just like, I mean, sometimes I actually feel like I actually don't have a response to that. Like that's sad, right? And there's a lot of potential around here, and really it just requires that small step of connecting all of the stakeholders in that process. I think. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Rabio. Thank you, Rabio. Just remind me one words in the political science that say, my professor keep telling me that all politics is local politics. So everyone should go back to our countries to engage more people, especially the citizens. Of course, we have to engage with the staff in the parliament, because they are a very crucial part. Because maybe the MPs will change, the CSO may change, but staff may be the longest persons in the parliament. So next speaker will be the staff from our Taiwan's parliament, Cai Ping-quan. So let's give the floor to him.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today I want to share the topic from the Parliament's stable opinion point of view. Taiwan's state election was held in 2020. The Constitution of Taiwan still states that there should be 113 legislative members of Parliament. Taiwan currently has 4 political parties with legislators classified according to political party. However, legislators may be elected and serve without having party affiliation as well. Legislator Lin is one of them. The speaker is elected by majority vote from the 113 legislators among their ranks. The speaker represents parliament to the whole world and nominate the Secretary General to assist in the internal administrative work. The essential part of the speaker role is to guide internal organization matters. Taiwan law stipulates that at least 3 legislators from a political party are needed to form a caucus. There are currently 4 caucuses in Parliament. The Speaker asks the representative from each caucus for their guidance through caucus group consultation. The establishment of the Open Parliament Committee for 2021 to 2024 was completed through this process. The Open Parliament Committee, they compose a party caucus representation, citizen groups, and legislative steps. Members come from diverse fields, provide different perspectives and opinions. After the committee member reach a consensus, they form the 2021 to 2024 Open Parliament Action Plan. It's hoped that all work on the action plan will be complete within 4 years. Over the past 3 years, thanks to the support of the Speaker and the coordination effort of the legislator being, most of the work on the action plan has been completed. And in May of this year, we also commissioned OGP expert to obtain an independent initial review. Open Parliament Action Plan of Taiwan will end in January 2024. How to continue the work of Open Parliament in the future is an important issue. Taiwan will hold election in January 2024, and both the Speaker and legislator being have indicated not to run for re-election. The progress of the Open Parliament Action Plan should not lose past. The key is success lies in the determination of those in Parliament. At the OGP Summit opening plenary, Kai Krendorf emphasized the importance of turning ideas into action and fostering a strong dialogue between civil society and politicians. She said, "No one has all answers to the world problem, but we can find them through co-creation. So we can emphasize the importance to legislators. Incoming legislator would understand the critical issue and support the work of an open parliament." Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ying Chen. So you got a very big news is that Freddie Lim is not running for the next elections. I don't know if Freddie's still here. Maybe you should take a photo with him because maybe next time you will not be the MPs anymore. We already had that photo yesterday. So that's a big issue in Taiwan because just like Sammy said that after maybe one connect point after he's not running the election anymore, there's no momentum in the parliament to sustain this open parliament action plan. So why we established this side event, we want to hear the voice from every country, every regions, maybe not just for our speakers. So it's time for our audience. You have any experience you want to share to us? It's time for you. We have maybe 10 minutes. So I will collect two or three questions from you guys, and then we can have some discussion. I'm not saying Q&A, it's a discussion from you and from the speakers. Okay, so I will ask the partners from Taiwan if anyone can pass the microphone. Okay, there's from Ghana, the delegation, right? Okay.
Thank you very much, James, and thanks your panelists. I think Sami has said it all, but I have one of the things to share. Your experience is unique in the sense that you have done your homework well, you have your own action plan without even being a member of OGP. It shows clearly that you are ahead of time. We started ours when we became members of OGP. That's in Ghana, Ghana's case. But the issue has to do with sustaining the momentum, just as the two speakers have mentioned. If Lane is not running, then it means that Lane is taking the vim out. Now, if Lane is taking the vim out, hot next. And so it comes back to what Sami has mentioned. In Ghana, you need to incorporate this open parliament agenda in the strategic framework of parliament, so that with or without Lane, it will continue. If Lane leads and the staff, parliamentary staff, or there's nothing in as a strategic plan from Taiwan Parliament, then it means that the champion of OGP has left the scene and is gone with the team. I have still remained in Parliament, and I want to continue remaining in Parliament as long as I have the strength and my constituency lets me. And I'll continue to do what it takes. But what about if they let me and, well, you pass on, you die? How will you go? And so we found it in us to make sure that it's included in our strategic plan. That's the first point. The second point has to do with the political parties. You've mentioned that if your political party is in power today and they are driving the agenda, and then there's a changeover of government, and the next political party decides that, well, I'm not interested in this agenda, what do you do? And so on Tuesday, we discussed the issue of cross-cutting political parties, where you can reach out to your colleagues from the other political parties to have the same agenda, so that you're not alone from your party, but you have collaborators from other political parties who will assist you. Even if your party is not in power, we can still run it. I was running it when my party was in power, but as soon as my party left power, somebody has taken over. And it helps you to continue with the agenda, because it is not your agenda, but it's a global agenda that you have subscribed to. And so, Lin Shu, I explained to him on Tuesday that he needs to reach out to other people and mentor others. It should not be that you are going to be the only champion of OGP forever or anti-corruption forever. You should mentor people to understand that, look, this is for your own good. I'll give a typical example. In my constituency, the Open Parliament agenda has helped me, because every time we are on recess, I go back to my constituency to do what we call town hall meeting. Town hall meeting where you meet your constituents to tell them what you are doing in Parliament, the laws that you've passed, all the action plans that you've taken. You let the constituents know and they ask you a question. So the town community engagement, citizen engagement has helped me and has rated me high. So anytime I put myself out there, you are elected, because you have created the ambient, you created the opportunity for yourself. So what is in there for MPs? You need to let them know that there's something in there for you. And so they must prepare themselves to take them on to. I'm talking too much, so let me allow this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, this MP from Ghana. Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you for your sharing. So maybe others want to share your experience or your aspect, or any questions for the speakers. Okay.
Hi everyone. Hi everyone, I'm Phil from Canada. I work at the Simon Fraser University Morris J. Wass Center for Dialogue. I don't really have a question, more just a couple of quick points. One, I think that the emphasis placed on media made a lot of sense. Anytime we're talking about openness in government, it seems to make a lot of sense that we need to be engaging the media to achieve that openness as the sort of intermediary between government and the public. The other point I just wanted to make around sort of engaging those four quadrants as Sammy described, I think a few of the different speakers on the stage had pointed to the importance of positioning open government and how it's important to these different groups. We need to sort of understand why it brings value to them, but I also think it's critical in that to achieve that, to set up a bit of a reciprocal relationship with each of those groups. Maybe unsurprising because I'm from the Center for Dialogue. If you can set up a dialogue where you're not saying, here's why open government is important to you, but here's why we think open government is important to you, how does that land with you? Does this resonate? Are there things we're missing? Could we change this message so that it sort of meets your needs to a greater degree? And what can we bring you from your perspective that would have it bring the most value? So that's all I just want to say.
Thank you very much. The experience from Canada. We definitely should get back, put some reporters, put some journalists in our OPNSF. Okay, so does anyone else want to share the experience?
Thank you very much. My name is Benjamin. I'm with Parliamentary Network as well. Sami is my boss. So I just want to touch on the points made by Ravi on the fact that it's not just about creating the platforms or the tools for citizen participation, and that it goes beyond that, because mostly the tools are there, the platforms are available, but the citizens' involvement and the motivation to use them or to even participate, which stems from the fact that they do not see any outcomes of those engagements or their involvement after the process has been ended. So a typical example, for instance, in Ghana, where just last month a Citizens Bureau, which is an office created in Parliament or created by Parliament to engage citizens. So citizens or civil society are able to engage their MPs, they're able to lay their inputs through their MPs to Parliament. Now, if this platform is created as a good achievement, and some months, some years ahead, citizens really do not see how this department or this platform is churning out the results for open parliaments, they will now lay back and just tell themselves, well, after all, we engage, we send the statements, we send the petitions, we tell our MPs to do this, but we don't see, in the end, we don't even see semblance of them in Parliament's questions. We don't see semblance of them in Parliament statements, MPs making statements on them on the floor of Parliament. So later, we will now come back to whip up as Honorable MP mentioned, the vim again, which will take us back to now want to create other platforms again, want to create other tools again. Meanwhile, in the end, if citizens do not see the outcome, any results from the previous engagement, it will always be a difficult achievement for us. And so I think I agree with that point, and it's something we really need to whip up with parliaments and with governments, showcasing some of these things that citizens make into the processes of engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin. Actually in Taiwan, we're trying to educate the people or try to propaganda for the OGP achievement in our open parliament also. So in the end of the event, I will give each speaker 1 minute for a short concluding or any other comments for everyone.
I think I really learned a lot, not only in this side event, but also in the whole summit. So it's my first summit, yeah. So I think just to have a conclusion, like in Taiwan, as I said, we only have the first NAP in open parliament in Taiwan now, and we have tried to introduce what it is to the citizens. And I want to share that when we share this kind of value with them, they will ask me about, is there something that if I have something in my daily life, so I can ask my question in some kind of platform, so the parliament will answer or reply to me, is something like that. So I find out that, yeah, our citizens care about open parliament value, but because the first NAP is not about maybe some local parliament things, so maybe maybe that's something we cannot engage them in the first phase we are now in. So maybe the next step for us is about trying to link this open value to the citizens, and also thanks for your response that we might have to think about how to engage the MP more in our OP and SF. And also I think we have a good start with the Parliament state that we start to cooperate with them smoothly now. So I really hope that Taiwan can have a second NAP in the next 4 years.
I'll probably say we need to start speaking the same language as politicians in order to advance these reforms. Listening to Ben, to the Honorable earlier, at the end of the day, a lot of the times I observe that civil society across the world keeps coming out with the moral arguments when they try to entice parliamentarians, politicians, other government officials to engage in OGP in open parliament. But to be frank, right, like they don't necessarily respond to these moral arguments in the sense that, oh, why do we need to be inclusive? Because it's the right thing to do. Why do we need to be open? Because it's the right thing to do. Like nobody's, like these political actors, they don't necessarily respond to those arguments. So what do they respond to? Arguments of capital, not always in the sense of funds or money, but it's also like, for example, Indonesia, 3 years ago, a major bill that the government really needed to advance economic reforms before COVID got pushed, really big pushback from the civil society and citizens to the point that the Constitutional Court deemed it unconstitutional, right? So when we wanted to sort of like engage the parliament in order to increase participation and inclusion in legislative process, instead of telling them that, hey, you should be more inclusive in the legislative process of this bill, because it's the right thing to do, what we said was, you remember the experience when a bill that you spent like years working on just got struck down by the Constitutional Court? You know how you can avoid that? Like, be more participative, right? Like, create more consultation process, like publish your, and then like, then you work through that steps. Like, after the consultation ends, you say, you know what we can do next? Like, we'll take notes of the consultation, we'll publish the notes, and then we open like, like a 2-week, a month online comment period so that anyone who was not in that consultation can also make that opinion heard, right? So it's a step-by-step process, and it's not always like complicated. Like, in Mongolia, because the government knows that the citizens, like the internet penetration rate is low, and like over 80% of the country is connected to the internet only for Facebook and Twitter, social media, because like there's a lot of internet services who only provide like cheap data packages that but like you can only access Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter, right? The government stopped developing like their own website for public consultation. They just use Facebook and Twitter, and they receive more response than they ever did, with all their sophisticated and fancy website developed specifically for that. So like, speak their language and like, try to identify like for every reform that you want to advance, what would be the carrot that the government wants, that the government would or the parliament would respond to in order to initiate action.
Yeah. Now, in the presentation that Claire made, she highlighted 3 challenges that the open parliament arrangement in Taiwan through the multi-stakeholder forum have been facing. And for me, listening to everybody, including the comments that were made in the audience and what have you, I think that there's been some interesting suggestions that could help address some of these challenges. The first that was mentioned was the difficulty in tracking commitments. And I think we've had a conversation around how if these commitments are linked to the priorities of Parliament, the strategic priorities of Parliament, the things that they're already doing, the things that they can see reason for, then as they go about their day-to-day activities, we'll be achieving the open Parliament. So find interesting ways to do that, has been one of the things that have stood out for me in the presentations today. The second challenge was a bit about commitments that are away from citizens' priorities, and then the third being the low participation of MPs. And if you put these two together, I think we've had conversations around how to make the commitments the everyday bread and butter issues of the citizenry, for which reason the MP finds incentive in it, because it's about the next elections as well. So connecting the citizens' priorities, connecting the MP's priorities so that people can recognize what is in there for them. And I think these are very important reflections, including the fact that, if we can get all these stakeholders together, let them to play their own roles, but also communicate among themselves, engage, each other to find out how we can play their respective roles. We'll be able to do great. So I can only wish the team in Taiwan all the very, very best, both in your local Open Parliament engagements, and then also even for the conversation around the Asia PMO network. And you can always count on us from Parliamentary Network Africa and the team in Africa to be able to also support with our experiences going forward.
Since the comments, I think education also is a good method to citizen and the legislator understand open parliament is a critical issue.
Okay, thank you for all the speakers and thank you for the participations. You're spending the last few hours maybe in Tallinn. I hope you have a good fruit from this side event. And I wish, no matter which countries, we can work a lot more than just in the summit with discussions, not just hashtag OGP Estonia. Then we can do something actual in our country for the open government, open parliaments, both sides. It's very important. So thank you all. I think we have to close this event. Thank you for your invaluable contributions. I look forward to our path cross again soon. Maybe next time, maybe next summit, maybe Taiwan, please. Taiwan is more snakes than just pineapple cake. Advertisement again. Please welcome to Taiwan and have more than just democracy. We have a lot of interesting things there. Okay, thank you for your participations. Our side can just close here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We still have a lot of snacks.